Nobody warned you about the relationships that don't feel dangerous, the ones that begin with warmth, with what feels like understanding, with a woman who seems to see you in a way no one else ever has. Those are the ones that do the real damage, not because she is a villain, but because the destruction is so gradual, so wrapped in moments that genuinely felt like love, that by the time you realize what's happening, you've already lost something you can't easily name. Your voice, your direction, your sense of what you deserve. The version of yourself you were before you started reshaping everything around her comfort, her moods, her needs. Here is the uncomfortable truth that most men spend years learning the hard way. Not every woman who chooses you is choosing you. Some are choosing what you represent: stability, attention, a mirror for their pain, an audience for their performance. And the tragedy is not that these women are evil. Most of them are genuinely wounded, genuinely unaware of the patterns they carry. The tragedy is that their unhealed wounds, their unconscious strategies, their emotional vacancy, all of it becomes your problem the moment you decide to stay. You absorb what they cannot process. You carry what they refuse to face. And slowly, without a single dramatic moment, you disappear. What you are about to encounter in this video are 6 psychological profiles, 6 patterns of relating that, regardless of how they present on the surface, lead to the same destination. A man who has spent his best energy on a connection that was never built to give anything real back. This is not a manual for cynicism. It is not a case against love or against women. It is a case for consciousness, for developing the clarity to recognize early when a dynamic is costing you more than it is building you. Because the greatest act of self-respect is not walking away after the damage is done. It is learning to see clearly before the damage becomes the story of your life. She doesn't arrive in your life looking like a threat. She arrives looking like someone who needs you, sensitive, a little fragile, with a history that explains her wounds and eyes that seem to be searching for someone safe enough to finally let her guard down, and you being the kind of man who responds to vulnerability. Lean in. You want to be that safe person. You want to be the one who finally gets it right for her. What you don't yet see is that her vulnerability is not an invitation to intimacy. It is the opening move in a game whose rules she has spent years perfecting and that you have never been taught to recognize. The mechanism she operates through is guilt. But guilt delivered so softly, so wrapped in apparent pain, that it never feels like manipulation. It feels like your failure. She doesn't demand, she sighs. She doesn't criticize directly. She compares quietly, subtly, in ways that leave you questioning whether you are enough without ever being able to point to the exact moment the doubt was planted. She cries at the precise moment you are about to assert yourself. She becomes fragile exactly when you need her to be steady. And each time you adjust, each time you shrink yourself to accommodate her emotional architecture, she learns that the strategy works, so she uses it again. The exit from this dynamic begins with a single realization. Love does not require you to constantly prove you are not the villain. Healthy relationships are not structured around ongoing trials where your character is perpetually in question. If you find yourself regularly explaining, justifying, apologizing for things you are not certain you did wrong, that is not a relationship asking you to grow. That is a relationship designed to keep you off balance, because a man who is always defending himself is a man who has no energy left to see clearly. The moment you stop accepting guilt as a substitute for genuine communication, the architecture of her control begins to collapse. And in that collapse, you find out very quickly whether there is anything real underneath it. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from loving someone whose capacity to receive is infinite and whose capacity to give is theoretical. The eternal princess is not cruel in any obvious way. She is charming, she is often beautiful, she knows how to make you feel in the early weeks like the most chosen man in the room, but what she is selecting you for is not partnership, it is service, and the distinction only becomes clear after you have already invested enough that leaving feels like loss, which is of course precisely when it becomes most important to see the truth. Her defining characteristic is an expectation of effort that exists entirely outside of reciprocity. You are expected to anticipate, to initiate, to surprise, to remember, to show up consistently, creatively, without prompting. And when you do, it is received not with genuine gratitude but with a quiet evaluation. Was it enough? Was it the right thing? Did it meet the standard she has never explicitly stated but holds with absolute conviction? When it falls short, and it always eventually falls short. She does not erupt. She withdraws. She becomes a little cooler, a little more distant, and you, conditioned by this point to chase her warmth, immediately begin calculating what you did wrong and how to correct it. What makes this pattern so corrosive over time is what it does to your relationship with your own judgment. You begin to outsource your sense of adequacy entirely to her responses. A good day is a day she seemed pleased. A bad day is a day she seemed disappointed. Your internal compass, your own sense of whether you're showing up well in your life, gets replaced by the constant reading of her mood. And that is the real cost of the eternal princess, not the time, not the money, not the effort. It is the gradual erosion of your own authority over your life. The recovery begins when you understand this clearly. Devotion freely given to someone who cannot genuinely receive it is not love. It is self-abandonment dressed in romantic clothing. She is magnetic in a way that is difficult to explain and even more difficult to resist. She moves through rooms like someone who has studied the effect she has on people and decided to lean into it completely. She is witty, visually arresting, socially fluent, the kind of woman who makes you feel, simply by choosing to talk to you, that you have been selected for something rare. And in a sense you have been selected as her latest and most proximate source of reflection, not because you are exceptional to her, but because you are present, and she requires someone present to confirm continuously that she exists at the level she needs to believe she does. The psychological engine driving this pattern is not confidence. It is its precise opposite. Beneath the performance is a terror of invisibility, so acute that her entire relational life has been structured around never being ignored. Every interaction is quietly evaluated for what it produces: attention, desire, admiration, envy. The men in her orbit are not people she is building something with, they are metrics. Evidence that she is wanted, and you, if you are paying close enough attention, will notice that genuine emotional intimacy, the kind that requires her to be uncertain, unpolished, genuinely exposed, is something she consistently, elegantly avoids. She will give you performance, she will never give you act. The reason this matters for your life is simple. You cannot build anything real with someone who is not really there. You can be enchanted, you can be entertained, you can experience something that has the texture of connection without any of its substance. But over time, the absence of genuine reciprocity, the absence of a woman who is as interested in knowing you as she is in being seen by you, creates a specific kind of loneliness that is worse than being alone. Because you are technically in a relationship, you are technically chosen, and yet you feel, in the quiet moments, completely unseen. That feeling is not a malfunction. It is accurate information, and accurate information acted on in time is the only thing that saves you. She tells you early that she has been hurt before, and you, being someone with empathy, receive that information with care. You think, she is being honest with me, she is trusting me with something real. And in that moment, something shifts in you, a quiet commitment forms, almost unconsciously, to be different from the men who came before. To be the one who proves that not everyone leaves, not everyone lies, not everyone eventually becomes another wound in a long series of wounds. It is a noble impulse. It is also, if you're not careful, the beginning of a sentence you will spend years trying to finish without ever reaching the period. Here is what unhealed trauma does inside a relationship. It creates a parallel reality. In that reality, you are never entirely yourself. You are also a composite of every man who hurt her before you. Your lateness is not lateness. It is abandonment echoing forward from someone else's departure. Your silence is not thoughtfulness. It is the cold withdrawal she learned to dread from a relationship you had no part in. Your affection, when it comes too easily, triggers suspicion, because in her history, warmth was always the prelude to something being taken away. You are, in the most exhausting sense, in a relationship with her entire past, and her past has more history with her than you ever will. The boundary that protects you here is not a wall against her pain. It is a clear-eyed understanding of what is and is not your responsibility. You can offer patience, you can offer consistency, you can be honest, reliable, and genuinely present. What you cannot do, what no man can do, is heal someone who has not decided to heal herself. Trauma resolved through relationship is rarely resolved at all. It is transferred. And if you stay long enough and give enough of yourself to the project of being her proof that love is safe, you will eventually discover that you have become simply the next data point in a pattern you were trying to interrupt. Your exit is not abandonment. It is the acknowledgement that some healing can only happen alone. She is the woman everyone admires from the outside, the one who is always available, always giving, always putting herself last so that everyone around her can have what they need. She shows up when others don't. She remembers the details. She does the things no one asked her to do and then quietly, almost imperceptibly, makes sure you know she did them. And at first, being loved by someone like this feels extraordinary. It feels like being truly seen, truly cared for, truly prioritized. What takes longer to understand, sometimes years longer, is that her giving is not free. It never was. Every sacrifice she makes is a deposit into an emotional account she expects one day to collect on. And the interest is compounding in ways you cannot yet calculate. The psychology beneath the martyr pattern is a profound confusion between love and debt. She was taught by family, by early experience, by a culture that rewarded female self-erasure, that her value is located entirely in her usefulness to others. Which means that when she gives to you, she is not expressing abundance. She is negotiating her worth. Every meal prepared, every favor extended, every moment of her own needs set aside is a quiet argument for why she deserves to be kept, to be appreciated, to be loved back with the same totality she is offering. And when that reciprocity doesn't arrive, when you fail to match her level of sacrifice, as you inevitably will, because her level is not sustainable for any healthy human being, her unexpressed expectation curdles into resentment. What makes this dynamic particularly difficult to escape is the guilt it generates. She never raises her voice. She never issues ultimatums. She simply continues giving, visibly exhaustedly, while the weight of her unspoken expectation settles onto your chest, like something you cannot name but cannot ignore. You find yourself giving back not from genuine desire, but from the need to relieve that pressure. And now you are both trapped, she in a pattern of giving that is slowly hollowing her out, you in a pattern of reciprocating that is driven by obligation rather than love. The relationship has become a transaction masquerading as devotion. The only honest exit is the conversation neither of you wants to have. That love which keeps score is not love at all, it is a contract. And you never signed it. Every relationship with a chronic victim follows the same arc, and it moves slowly enough that most men don't recognize it until they are already deep inside it. It begins with her pain, which is real. It begins with stories that make sense, with a history that explains her difficulty, with a present that seems like it would genuinely improve if someone, the right someone, would simply show up with enough patience and enough strength to help her through it. And you, being a man who does not run from difficulty, decide to be that person. You decide to be the stability she has never had, the consistency, the proof that someone can stay. What you don't yet understand is that for the eternal victim, rescue is not the destination, it is the ongoing condition of the relationship. The mechanism that sustains this pattern is the systematic refusal of personal responsibility. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a consistent gravitational pull toward explanations that locate the source of every problem outside of herself. Her job situation is her employer's fault. Her friendships collapsed because others were disloyal. Her previous relationships failed because her partners were inadequate. And now, in your relationship, the same logic applies. When things are difficult, it is the circumstances, it is her past, it is external pressure, it is anything and everything except a choice she made and could make differently. And you, trying to be fair, keep finding ways to agree. Keep finding the external factors that might explain what you are witnessing. Until one day you realize you have spent so long looking outward for explanations that you stopped looking clearly at what is directly in front of you. The cost of staying in this relationship is not paid all at once. It is paid in the slow depletion of your optimism, your energy, your belief that effort produces change. Because with the eternal victim, effort does not produce change. It produces dependency. The more you give, the more she requires, because your giving confirms her central narrative that she cannot manage without being saved. And every time you save her, you delay by another season the moment she might have to confront the one person whose choices are actually shaping her life. Leaving is not cruelty. Leaving clearly, without anger, without drama, is sometimes the most honest thing you can offer someone whose growth has been stalled by the comfort of having someone else carry the weight. Here is the question that matters more than any profile, any warning sign, any list of red flags. Why did you stay? Not in a spirit of self-blame, but but in genuine curiosity, because the 6 women described in this video do not randomly select their partners. They find men who, for reasons rooted in their own history, their own unexamined needs, their own quiet wounds, are available to be found. The manipulator finds the man who confuses guilt with love because somewhere in his past, love and guilt arrive together. The eternal princess finds the man whose sense of worth is tied to being needed. The martyr finds the man who cannot tolerate someone else's disappointment. These are not coincidences. They are matches, imperfect, painful matches, but matches nonetheless. The most important work you will ever do in your relational life is not learning to identify problematic women. It is learning to identify the patterns within yourself that make certain dynamics feel familiar, even comfortable, even when they are costing you everything. The man who consistently attracts chaos has usually learned somewhere early that chaos is what love feels like. The man who gives endlessly to women who cannot receive has usually learned that his value is conditional on his usefulness. The man who stays long past the point of clarity has usually learned that leaving means something terrible about who he is. These are not character flaws, they are adaptations, but adaptations that served you once can imprison you indefinitely if you never examine them in the light. This is where the real transformation lives, not in avoiding the wrong women, but in becoming the kind of man whose relationship with himself is solid enough that unhealthy dynamics lose their grip before they take root. A man who knows his own value does not need to earn it through endless giving. A man who has processed his own pain does not confuse someone else's wound with a calling. A man who is genuinely at peace with himself does not require external chaos to feel alive. That man, clear, grounded, self-aware, does not attract destruction. He attracts slowly and genuinely what actually matches him. And that is the work, not a checklist, not a set of warnings, a deeper, more honest relationship with yourself. Every relationship you have ever stayed in too long, every dynamic you recognized somewhere in this video, every moment you gave more than was returned and told yourself it would eventually balance out, none of it makes you weak. It makes you human. It makes you someone who wanted something real badly enough to keep trying even when the evidence was pointing elsewhere. But wanting something real and consistently choosing what is familiar are two different things. And the distance between those two choices is where your future actually lives. The question is not whether you have been here before. The question is whether now that you can see it clearly, you are willing to choose differently. What you deserve is not a perfect woman. It is an honest one. A woman whose giving comes without a hidden ledger, whose vulnerability is genuine rather than strategic, whose past is something she is actively working through rather than unconsciously transferring onto you, whose identity does not depend on your constant validation, and whose love does not arrive prepackaged with conditions you only discover after you have already paid the price of entry. That kind of woman exists, but she tends to find men who have done enough work on themselves to recognize her. Men who are not drawn exclusively to intensity and drama because they have mistaken those things for depth. So here is where this ends and where you begin. Not with a resolution to never trust again, not with a hardened cynicism that protects you from pain by keeping you from everything, but with a commitment to clarity, to noticing sooner, to trusting what you observe over what you hope, to valuing your peace as much as you value connection, because a connection that costs you your peace is not a connection, it is a slow erosion. You have spent enough time being shaped by what others need you to be. The next chapter belongs to you. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into this kind of work. Your standards are not too high. You simply haven't been applying them to yourself with the same conviction you are now ready to bring. Start there. Everything else follows.